All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast. This is our second episode. So if you came back to this one from the first one, thank you so much. If this is your first,
Why?
why? If this is your first time listening to us, cool. Thanks for coming. We're going to be talking today about concept albums. So that's the main topic of discussion. Would anybody like to kick it off? Actually, let's introduce ourselves again for people who might be unfamiliar.
Hi, my name is William Lasky. I'm in the band Keep the 11. I play the drums.
Your voice was so loud.
Everyone has to know this guy's in Keep the 11, world-renowned rock.
This is important information.
Okay, my name is Blake. I like music.
Really? That's so interesting. I'm Evan. I also like music.
I'm Brendan. I also do, in fact, like music. And that's what we will be
No
discussing.
way.
Yes way.
Small world.
And last but not least, the one and only Blake.
Me. Blake 2. Hi, I'm Reese. I play guitar and I like to sing and I like to make stupid concept albums because people make fun of me for them.
Wait, what band are you from?
Keep going. Okay, so let's kick things off. So a lot of people say like, okay, well, really, what is a concept album? So kind of like, what is the defining statement of it? In my opinion, concept album is pretty much an album that kind of has just a deeper meaning to it. It doesn't need to be specific. It doesn't need to be some specific story. It's just there's like this larger than life purpose or meaning for people to understand. For example, I think even when you type in concept album on Google, on a Google search, the first album that comes up is probably
kinda.
no, is probably Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Yeah.
That's probably the number one. When it comes to concept albums, this is pretty much the go-to for pretty much everybody, the one that everybody knows about. I know Pink Floyd has a ton of albums in their catalog that are referred as concept albums, but I think by far this is the one that they do best. Most of the album was written by Roger Waters as well as David Gilmour. Pretty much the whole story about, The Wall, if you've never heard it before.
It's about a
Pretty
wall.
much.
Yeah.
Please listen.
Isolation wall. It's pretty much that's what it's about.
Mental
Building of an
wall.
isolation wall. Yep.
Quarantine?
Yeah, if you haven't listened to The Wall, listen to The Wall.
The best way to listen to The Wall, though, is start to finish with if you have it on vinyl with the lyric sheet in front of you. And so it's almost like it's reading through the story while you're also hearing it at the same time. And I think the combination of both just the lyricism of the album and the actual atmosphere of the music itself makes for just a crazy listen. Love that record.
Or if you're lucky, you can go in your grandmother's attic and find a Laserdisc copy of the movie. And also watch it that way.
Only on Laserdisc.
Only on
would you say?
Laserdisc. Guys, not
And also,
sponsored by Laserdisc, but only on Laserdisc.
I also want to say a lot of concept albums have been made into movies. I know that also.
Musicals.
Well, I think that's an important
Musicals as
point
well.
to make, especially about Brendan talking about reading the lyrics, is because it's a story. It's essentially like you're reading a book, except you're listening to it. But yeah, that's why it's so easy to turn it into stuff like musicals and movies and stuff like that, because it's not just the songs about that and the songs about this. There's, like Reese said, there's that big overall meaning to it.
And I want to jump.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Evan, you go.
Yeah, my initial understanding of concept albums, what it was just every song was connected and telling a story. Like Reese said, The Wall is a really great example of that. Maybe like Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche is a great example of that. But really, I think the actual definition is much more vague, much more broad. It's really just, I think, at least all, if not most of the songs just connect thematically, if not, if it's not like just telling one story, it's at least thematically connected. Like Brendan, maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't. Like, I think Melodrama by Lorde could probably be considered a concept album, just because of its themes and the story is kind of telling, kind of not.
A lot of critics have referred to it as a concept album. Lorde herself said it's not, which I find interesting. But for example, I actually pulled up some lyrics from the album, specifically because this is one of the concept albums that I did want to talk about. And I'll bring up the idea of solitude that seems to be present throughout pretty much the entire project, and loneliness. On the song Sober, there's the lyrics, midnight we're fading, till daylight we're jaded. We know that it's over. In the morning you'll be dancing with all the heartache and the treason and the fantasies of leaving. Sort of just talking about how at the end of the party, you'll wake up the next morning and realize that everything you did the night before was just completely meaningless. And then that comes back later on the song Perfect Places, which is the album closer, where there's the lyric, spill my guts beneath the outdoor light. It's just another graceless night. I hate the headlines and the weather. I'm 19 and I'm on fire, but when we're dancing, I'm all right. It's just another graceless night. Which I think also ties in to the idea of just doing actions that, in the grand scheme of things, are meaningless, and the feeling that that sort of gives you, of that sort of loneliness and isolation, and like, what is it all for attitude. So I agree. Melodrama, I think, could definitely be considered a concept album. But to jump off of what Reese said before regarding that the concept albums don't necessarily have to have a storyline, and I think that's extremely true and ties into what Evan said regarding the thematic continuity of songs in an album, that they just kind of have to revolve around the same theme. I also think that that theme has to be bigger, or it doesn't have to be necessarily bigger, but in line with a decent amount of the song topics. So one new concept album I could think of that Reese and I have fallen in love with is the new Fiona Apple album, which deals with the concept of being a woman in the 21st century and dealing with being told that you're not good enough, or that you can't have a say, or domestic violence, or feelings of love. Like, I think
Or just not being heard, not being listened to.
not being listened, that yeah, like songs like Under the Table, especially. So I think it can be broader, not necessarily a storyline, and just more an idea of what all of the songs should fall in line with.
I think I also wanted to bring up a few other. I brought two other vinyls, or actually I have a few more, but two modern day vinyls, in my opinion, that represent kind of like modern day concept albums. The first one that I had, I don't know if a lot of people have given it a listen yet, but is the Lumineers 3. That's their newest record.
Oh, that's so good.
It's an extremely good record, and I honestly think this is an example of like a modern day concept album, because it really does, it tells that story. There's a deeper meaning than, let's say, you listen to Glory and go, or Donna and go, wow, that's a really, really good song, or Life in the City, that's a really good song. But if you look at it, I really love the way they do this, because each side, it's a double LP. Each side of the vinyl is a chapter. You have chapter 1, Gloria Sparks, then you have Junior Sparks, then you have Jimmy Sparks, and every single song kind of tells them a story of who they are and kind of what they represent. And it's really, really neat. I've never seen an album that was kind of like parted like this. That was one that I think is like a modern day concept album. Is Lumineers 3, and then I have one more. And I think this is another example. It kind of revolves into rap, one of my favorite artists. Tyler the Creator's Igor. I think this is completely represented as a concept album. A lot of the lyricism in the entire album, it's all about him falling in love with this girl who he thinks is too good for her. And then when he gets into the relationship, he doesn't really like it. And it's kind of about that falling out and getting out of the relationship and saying, hey, can we still be friends? Hey, can we still be together? Can we work this out? And in the end, it really doesn't. So really, really, I think good example of a modern day concept album is Lumineers 3, and then also Igor as well.
Do you think a lot of concept albums like that are kind of made to relate to the audience on a deeper level, like
Yes.
not just to have an album with a more broadened meaning for like more interest, I guess, but like what you just talked about, the story of that record, it just kind of allows there to be a separate emotion that connects um, with the audience rather than just the actual music.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really, really good part of it. And I like what he said. I don't know who said it earlier, but when every song just fluently flows into each other, it's like you're reading that next chapter, you're reading that next page. It just keeps on going. You hear albums, every single album, Green Day, for example, or the new AWOL Nation album. It's more of just, hey, these are a bunch of tracks. Where I feel like a concept album, it's this like combined piece of music. I always say like a concept album, you could play through the LP and you wouldn't know when the next song is because it's just
That's a
one
good
piece.
example of it.
I
Dark Side of the Moon. If you listen through
Oh,
that all the way through, you would never know when the next song is.
yeah, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brendan.
Oh, I was gonna say, and I was gonna defer most of the discussion on this particular album to you, Evan, because I know it's one of your favorites. But to tie into what William said regarding reaching an audience, I think, for example, Kendrick Lamar's "To Pimp a Butterfly" is, I mean, it's a modern masterpiece. There's not really any disagreement as to whether or not it's like a classic. It is a classic. It will continue to be a classic. But like, for example, I'm the last person whose experiences could relate to anything that's discussed on that album. But the lyricism tells me more about the situation of African Americans in America than any history lesson ever could have. And so I think, in regards to reaching an audience, that's another example of just masterful songwriting to the point where someone like me who hasn't experienced anything that's detailed on that album can view it from my subjective lens and still find so much appreciation in it
Yeah,
because of its concept.
yeah. Will, you were talking about like concept albums being relatable. I think a lot of artists just kind of create concept albums, maybe based on stories or experiences that they've had, and they just kind of end up being relatable because they're real human experiences. Like, like we talked about, Igor, where it's about like falling in love and being disappointed. Obviously, that's something a lot of people could actually relate to. We talked about "To Pimp a Butterfly." Like, I can't relate to those lyrics, but what he has, and I think this is something that I think transcends across Kendrick's like entire discography, especially in like Good Kid, Mad City, and "To Pimp a Butterfly." But this concept of like how he like grew up in the hood, and Kendrick actually did. He grew up in Compton. He lived in Section 8 housing. He grew up poor. He talks about just like the culture of the hood and how like there's all this violence and all this like senseless killing, but he makes it out so like it's so casual. Like, think of the song "All Right." Like, there's a reason Pitchfork named that the best song of the decade. It's because he's talking about all this violence and all these terrible things that happen, but he caps it off with like, "We gonna be all right." Like, it's just so casual to him. I think a lot of people who maybe grew up in a situation similar to that can relate to that.
Do you think that it also? No, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Stay on this topic
Uh,
because I'm gonna change it when this is done.
All right, I was just gonna say, like, don't you think it also kind of doubles as a, kind of basically what you were just saying? It doubles as a platform to make, protest, whether it's political or social. But like if you think about American Idiot, it is a story about Saint Jimmy and the Jesus of Suburbia and what's her name and all these different characters, but they all represent different emotions and experiences, and a lot of it is aimed at that kind of that time period. So you think these morals from the stories not just relating to people overall, but maybe you see what I'm saying here, just kind of bringing an overall like a new something to relate to, like not an emotion that you've already experienced, but an emotion that maybe you should experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyways,
yes. You know, life experiences are life experiences. Whether or not we're actually going to be able to relate to some of these is, for the most part, entirely unpredictable. But I mean, who knows? Who knows?
So Blake, what were you gonna say?
So I like how we're talking about like how these types of albums like relate to life, but there's also like another side to it of like people like theorizing, making theories about like what the album actually is about, and you go back and forth. And the album I had in mind for that was none other than You're the Snitch by Death Grips, because the way the music is, it's got the basic structure of what a concept album would be, how it flows. All the songs flow into each other, and it has a main story that no one can really figure out. They have a lot of different theories, like one of them is about MC Ride, the main guy, becoming a cult leader and eventually losing his mind. And you can have, on the other hand, somebody, the exact same album, taking it in as MC Ride gets dirty and then goes home and takes a shower. Like, it can. There's just, like, so many different things you can make from a concept album, and I think that's why part of it exists. Like, the whole concept of a concept album is to have a concept about what it's about. I just said concept like 4 times there.
Is Justin Bieber's "Yummy" a concept song?
No. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Yeah. That's I agree with just the way that things can be interpreted, and maybe that they don't have a particular meaning. One that I can think of that I mentioned on the podcast last episode is Trout Mask Replica. And the concept of that album is that it's taking all of the musical sort of like standards, like the musical, you have to have a tempo, things have to be in rhythm, things have to sound in key, and saying, no, I'm not going to do any of that. And guess what? It's still music. And the concept of the album then is that it's specifically anti music while still being music, which is, again, not, it you can read into the lyrics of the album. Some of them are nonsensical, some of them do tell a story, but the concept is so abstract, and it's something I admire a lot.
So you're saying that the album is a concept album, despite like it not necessarily telling a story or having a lyrical theme, but just in the way that the music is actually written, it becomes a concept album.
Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely
Rare.
something that's rare. I'd have to think about other albums where the concept was more just in the songwriting than like the lyrics. I also wonder if some albums that were like written, honestly from a songwriter's experiences, even if it's not supposed to have a theme, if it's just good, honest songwriting, if it ends up being a concept album. Like the album I'm thinking of right now is Pinkerton by Weezer. Rivers Cuomo wrote that, I think, while or after he was at Harvard, and he was just kind of sad. He didn't really, he wasn't really comfortable. He was like just still some kind of nerdy teenager who had released a massive rock and roll album just a few years earlier. But the songs all kind of blend together as just kind of not like full blown emo, but like definitely like flavors of sadness while being this, this great honest album that he just kind of threw together that he based on his emotions.
So you're kind of saying like the album is a concept album in the sense that it has a similar overall emotion that it invokes and conveys rather than like an actual story. Like
Yeah,
the concept album doesn't have to be a story or something real. It can be like an emotion,
Yeah, because all of those songs on that album kind of emerged from this one mindset he was in, this all these emotions that you were having kind of blended together and made this album.
See, I find that interesting though because I'm gonna play devil's advocate and see what you guys think about this. But for example, the first 4 or so Beatles albums were nothing but love songs, and they revolve around the theme of love, but no one's really going to consider Please Please Me a concept album. Or like so where is that line drawn between an emotion that an album is supposed to convey and whether or not it's then a concept?
I think it
I
has.
always say,
I think it has to do with the complexity of the feelings.
Mhm.
I think love is such a general theme, and love is even like something that is just in like so many songs nowadays or in the olden days. That since it's a such a generalized theme, that's why people would be on the border of why they call it a concept. I think the point of a concept album, even though it can have a theme, I think the theme still would have to be more complex. Like maybe if it was about
second that.
love, it would be like love, like questioning love, or something a
Yeah.
little bit more deeper than just love in general.
It's like, what about love? You know, and also those first Beatles songs, they were singles. You
Well,
know,
yeah,
and
that is
they
true.
were designed to be singles too. And I think that's a whole kind of different topic when it comes to singles and diminishing concept albums and stuff like that. But it it also kind of brings in a focus on the intention of it. Like those songs weren't necessarily intended to go together into one concept. They were intended to be spewed out as singles. As Pinkerton, maybe it was intended to have this one overall looming emotion. You know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Will makes a really good point. You consider like the intent of the album at least a little bit, because when the Beatles wrote those songs, those aren't like Blake said, those aren't like emotionally complex like love songs. It's like that they wanted to write cute little pop songs, and obviously, I think the topic of like, oh, I want to hold your hand, like that's a good lyrical frame for like a cute little pop song in the
But I want to
60s
hold
where
whose hand? Why do I want to hold your hand?
I think
You got to go
it's
one step deeper.
kind of, yeah.
I think
Yeah, basically.
a huge part that we're not really jumping on is if the artist is that are they just putting it in your face going, "Hey, this song is about love," or "Hey, I want to hold your hand," or is it making you think about what's actually going on? That's why I took Igor for example, because
Hello.
if you listen, for example, everybody hears the track Earthquake and go, "Oh, you make my earthquake." Like what's it about? Like if you really go into the album, you'll figure out like there's a lot deeper meaning behind the song. I feel like when you look at those first Beatles albums, you go, well, there it is. I want to hold your hand. Love me do. Hey, do this. There it is. There's no underground behind it. There's no is there you explaining
We
it or
got
you just showing it?
we just have to make clear that we're not attacking the Beatles in any way, shape, or form. We're not saying it's worse to do it the way they did. It's just a different take on the idea.
What
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the? We'll go back to you in a sec, Brendan. I just wanted to keep this.
Mhm.
What about the idea of like, say, even though like a lot of the times like a concept album, not all the time, sometimes it will have like maybe narration or something like to tell a story. Like it doesn't necessarily mean it could be a concept album because like Logic for example, on some of his albums he has like background stuff for like a minute after the track and it's just him
Mhm.
talking about something, but it's not necessarily a concept album because it doesn't flow with each other.
Mhm.
So this is in line with the topic, but I want to draw. I think this is more of a clear contrast as to what we mean, and I'm gonna bring back a lyric from Melodrama. But these are two lyrics from two completely different artists that convey the same meaning, but one does it in a much more artistically fulfilling way than the other. So the first is from the song "All by Myself" by Celine Dion, and the lyrics are. Uh, Those days are gone. Living alone, I think of all the friends I've known. But when I dial the telephone, no one's home. All by myself. Don't want to be all by myself. Whereas in Melodrama, And I'm not dissing Celine Dion either. She has one of the greatest voices of all time. But Lord's Liability features the lyrics, "So I guess I'll go home into the arms of the girl that I love, the only love I haven't screwed up." And then later in the verse, she says, "We slow dance in the living room, but all that a stranger would see is one girl swaying alone, stroking her cheek," implying that she's completely alone and by herself, and that she's imagining
Whoa.
someone with her. And I
Gonna
think
cry, bro.
one of those is so much more emotionally impactful than the other, especially when you realize what it's talking about. And so I think that delineates, just on an artistic level, the point between simply talking about a concept and delving into it lyrically in a way to where you feel for that person. Like, I don't feel for Celine Dion singing All by Myself, like belting it in a chorus, but I feel for Lorde when she sings that lyric because it's heartbreaking compared to the simple emotion.
And
Yeah,
again,
you can
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
All right. Well, I think you have to look at that's another situation of the intent there. You know, All by Myself is a pop single, you know, and Lord, that song is she
Piano
made that
ballad.
song part of a masterpiece, you know,
Mhm.
a concept.
Solitude.
Did I just solve it all?
And songs can also like have like that like deeper meaning, but not necessarily like it doesn't follow in the entire album. I think that's really what defines the difference between a concept and a regular like music album.
Yeah.
Expand on that.
Okay, well you're talking about that. Let me give a different example. Come back to me in a sec when I come up with a different example.
Well, while Blake comes up with a different example, I'll show off the one concept album that I brought on vinyl for this podcast because I can.
If it's Dark Side of the Moon, go away.
It's not. It's Jethro Tull's "Thick as a Brick."
as a
I love
Yes.
this album.
Yeah.
I haven't delved into it lyrically that much, so I can't speak on its lyrical significance. But when Aqualung came out, critics were, if I recall correctly, knowing my small knowledge of music history, when Aqualung came out, they were hailing it as this prog rock masterpiece, and Ian Anderson was like, "What the hell? I wasn't trying to make a progressive album, so fine, I'll make a progressive album." And he created "Thick as a Brick," which is one song, 46 minutes long, and the concept is that it's the lyrics that an 8-year-old prodigy wrote for a poetry competition, and this is like the musical adaptation of it, but it was really just written by Ian Anderson. But the best part about this concept album is that the gatefold folds out into a full newspaper that you can then read, and has like actual articles as well as the whole lyric to the album in it. So on a packaging standpoint, it's just so cool.
No, that's a concept.
And yeah, that's a concept. It's not a concept that has any particular meaning, but
But it's
it-
under the same umbrella.
it's under the
It's
same
one
umbrella
song.
of it's one song. It's 46 minutes long, and the idea is that a prodigy wrote it, and this is it.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I adore.
Can we just say that the musical intuition to be able to do that, the lyrical musical intuition to be able to do that is like that just shows veteranship and being good. Like that's
Determination.
to have that sort of but to have that sort of outside view to be able to write it from a perspective that's not even yourself, like that's that's a little off topic, but that just shows musical maturity.
And I think it shows passion in. I mean, it was created to kind of parody and ended up being like "Thick as a Brick" is heralded as one of the best prog albums of all time. So it's created as a parody and ended up being like accomplishing what it was making fun of. Um, Yet, I think it just shows the musicianship to have the passion to put in one 46-minute song. It's crazy, just from a musical standpoint. Although I guess for in a mainstream rock musical standpoint, it's crazy. Uh, let me be more specific. Blake,
Hey,
have
Blake,
you got your?
Oh, yes. So I found the album, or an example of an album. It's a little bit abstract, but I kind of figured it out. So the album by Kelvin Harris, Funk Wave Volume 1, Funk Wave Bounces Volume 1, it doesn't, by no means is it not a concept album. Like, even though, like, songs all kind of sound the same, doesn't matter. My point with what I was trying to make earlier is they all have, each song has a separate theme. So when you talk about, like, the song, like, Holiday, it's talking about, like, chilling, laying back, having a doob, and just, like, enjoying life. Or if you go to, like, a song like Feels, it's, like, more talking about, like, something like your feelings for somebody, and you got those feels. So I was trying to find an example of something like that where a song doesn't, or a album doesn't necessarily have to have a main theme to, like, make sense if it's all together. I don't know.
I can vibe with that. I can vibe with the idea that each song having a different theme is kind of the theme. I'm trying to think of an example off of the top of my head of an album that's like that, that I can, like, compare it to, but I haven't.
Greta Van Fleet, Anthem of the Peaceful Army. Every song is different, but it's all about being a peaceful army.
All about sounding as close to a certain 70s rock band as they
Shut
can.
up. That still bothers me so much. Let's
You're
just have
talking
an
about
entire
Queen, right,
podcast.
Brendan?
Yeah.
Let's just
Queen
have a
did concept album. Queen did a concept album. Queen 2 is a concept album with side white and side black. And side white is a lot of lighter, poppier. It all kind of centers around fairy tales, but lighter, poppier side, and then side black is a heavier, doomier, more. I don't want to call it Viking style because there's nothing to do with Vikings on the album. Like a more heavy, fantastical style. Speaking of Queen, but yes, Queen and Greta Van Fleet, they sound peas in a
They're
pod.
the same band. I just want to have an entire podcast about Greta Van Fleet and just dig into the science of that.
Okay.
You know what, Will? Let's give Will his own episode just to talk about Greta Van
Let me
Fleet.
throw you.
It's gonna be our longest
Let me throw you a
episode.
curveball here, guys. What would
Okay.
you consider the album by Childish Gambino because the internet?
That's a concept.
I was actually
Yeah.
gonna say that. I was gonna talk
Yeah.
about Gambino.
Talk about it.
Okay, so I think Gambino. Okay, he only has 4 records out. So you have Camp. Okay, first record. Rap. Really nothing. I can't really see that being a concept album because the internet. I think that is very clearly a concept album. There's a subject. Everything kind of wraps around it.
There's a
your concept.
screenplay.
There's a screenplay, exactly. Also, newer albums, Awaken My Love. Do I think it's kind of a concept album? Sort of. I think there's a overhead theme about it, just kind of realization of being an African American in the 21st century. I think that's kind of what most of his albums are really relating to about. And then 31520, which is his newest album. I still can't figure that album. That's one of those like concept albums that I can't figure out what the theme, what the meaning of it is. Even in the slightest.
A lot of Kanye albums are concept albums. J. Cole and Tyler, the creator, Lauryn Hill, like so many artists, modern artists coming up with incredible concept albums. I have no idea what 315 is about.
So talking about like the whole Gambino thing, like those are concept albums that don't necessarily have a story. Like I think we have to separate kind of concept albums into 2 different categories because you have concept albums, like American Idiot that are literally stories, or Tommy by The Who. Like they're literally, you could turn them into books, you could turn them into movies. But you have albums like a lot of Gambino's albums that are not necessarily stories with characters and stuff there. It's just an overall idea. So it's a concept album in the sense that it has an umbrella, but that umbrella isn't a story. It's just an idea. You know what I'm going at?
Mhm.
kind of two different sides to
Yeah.
concept albums.
I get where you're going.
Talking about concept albums and talking about themes, I'm wondering, because the band, I'm thinking of Rage Against the Machine right now. Obviously, they're known for, well, they only have 3 albums. They only have 3 albums. So,
Don't
you
they
know,
have
maybe it's 3. 3, the 4th one's covers. Also, it's just not that good. But, so,
They have 3 good albums.
so as we, yes, so as I was saying, obviously Rage is known for not just like the music of like having like heavy music and Tom Morello making, you know, endless weird noise combinations, but obviously they're also known for their very politically charged lyrics, very like hip hop influence. And it's not just like on their first album or their second album or their third album. That theme applies to their entire discography. So that kind of raises the question, does that make Rage Against the Machine a concept band? And are there any other bands that could kind of carry one theme like their entire discography, or at least most of it?
Reese, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, like what I said, I don't think Rage, even in the slightest, is a concept band because, like what I said, there are bands that show it in their music, like without just saying, like Rage Against the Machine is extremely verbal. They're like, here it is, we're loud and we're proud, and then there are other bands that are like, we're gonna take it from a little bit slighter angle. I always take like you look at Beyonce's Lemonade, or you look at
That's a good
you look
example.
you look at 21 Pilots. I look at Blurry Face. It doesn't just shove it in your face and go, "Hey, look at me, I'm emo," or "Hey, look, I'm different." It's like it's something you have to discover for yourself.
Lemonade, another modern masterpiece of a concept album.
Yeah.
Absolutely adore that. Production is nuts on that record, actually.
I know none of us really like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, but
I like
lots
King
of their
Gizzard. King
albums,
Gizzard's awesome.
some like 8 of their albums are I would consider concept albums. I
I'm-
also said
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. All of their albums are concept albums.
I would also say Gorillaz. If anybody listens to the Gorillaz, they have
Father John
good
Misty.
concept albums there. Yeah, Father John Misty.
Yeah, Father John Misty's concept is just sadness. Just every
That's a tweet.
pure comedy. It's just like pure comedy just makes me hate the world.
Reese, did we talk
Anyway.
about Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness?
I was waiting. I was gonna go on a rant about that.
Go on your rant.
Go on your rant.
Okay, so here we go. Okay, so here's what I think. Okay, so Wall came out in what, 79? Okay, Wall came
Yeah.
out in 79. I count that as an 80s album because it really took off in the 80s. Okay, Melancholy came out in 1994.
Okay.
Okay.
It came out in 95.
95. Why did I say that?
Oh, fake fan.
Okay, Melancholy came out in 1995. Billy Corgan, I want to find the exact quote. He said it in an interview. He goes, what did he say specific? He pretty much said Melancholy was pretty much because Pink Floyd is Billy Corgan's favorite band. He also inducted them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He said that Melancholy was pretty much his generation's The Wall. That's kind of what it was. That's what he wanted his listeners to feel was The Wall, but for the young people. So, because The Wall, that was his concept album, so he wanted his listeners to have Melancholy. So yes, I think Melancholy is a prime example of a concept album. Why? Because there are some songs that you could listen to and go, I have no clue what this is about. I take XYU, extremely heavy song. You look at the lyrics and you're like, what the hell is this thing about? And if you listen to what Billy Corgan says about, he says it's about Courtney Love, and you would never interpret that from listening to the lyrics.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Billy Corgan may have gone to set out to create the 90s version of The Wall, but it's a lot less direct of an album lyrically than The Wall is, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think that album is definitely one I've gotten into arguments about whether or not it's a concept album, because I've said like I've cited that as a concept album that I really like, and people will be like, that's not a concept album. But I think the fact that it's so like difficult to interpret and really so open to interpretation is probably part of the brilliance of the album.
That's
I think
what
it's a
was going.
concept album.
That's what was going back basically to the whole Death Grips thing of how people interpret it, kind of, and make it more of a concept album itself. Go ahead, Bruce.
I was gonna say I think it's counted as a concept album if you have to pay $120 to get it on vinyl.
Cannot
Wait,
believe
isn't that the
why
one
do
I
I
got
need
you for
4
Christmas?
LPs? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so expensive.
Billy wants your money, Reese.
Look at this shit. It's a book. It comes with books.
Would you guys consider
that's what I said, like a
Artist
book.
Spotlight Volume 1 a concept album?
Artist Spotlight Volume 1. Shout out
Featuring-
Andrew Bordoni music.
Featuring the hit single Cash Caution by Heavy Water, aka Keep the 11.
The good old days
That's a
of
concept
Heavy Water.
album.
The concept is Andrew Bordoni.
That ties into a question that I asked earlier, which is before we started recording, which is, are compilations concept albums?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's
I
just
agree.
start out
It's
by
not.
saying
Oh
no.
no!
No.
Oh no! Here we go.
Reason being, and I'll give my justification, that a concept album is created in which, like, it's hard for me to discredit certain compilations because there's a movie I can think of that kind of breaks this idea, but you can't put a bunch of songs that initially had nothing to do with each other, even if they had something to do with each other thematically, that were written by the same person. So there's kind of a loss in regards to artistic flair in regards to the songs in a compilation that make it lose a bit of its conceptualness because it's not as cohesive. And the one exception I can think of, and the reason I think of this because I just had to watch it for a film class, is the movie Singin' in the Rain, the classic 50s musical, which features almost entirely songs that were previously written and pre-existing in a catalog of songs from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And they managed to make them all work together in a song and make it, or in a soundtrack, and make it sound like they were all intentionally written and linked to each other in one cohesive manner. The same way that some people will do musicals with songs out of order or from different albums of an artist sort of put in an order to tell a story. Singin' in the Rain does it to where it feels entirely real and entirely conceptual to the story of the film, when in fact none of the songs were created with that intention. But for the most part, I still think absolutely not.
Here's why I disagree with compilation albums being concept albums. And my main reason, I'm not saying some compilation albums, like your examples, can be concept albums in a sense. But I find that like a compilation album, if you're thinking of like broad terms, is basically like an organized playlist of music. Kind of. It could, because not like a compilation doesn't necessarily have to all be from the same artist. Most of the time it isn't. And if you think of like a playlist, it's like if you're vibing to like Sad Boy Hours songs, you're gonna have like some Joji on there. Then you're gonna have some other sad boy music on there. And it's like a playlist with a theme. But it's not, it wouldn't make it a compilation, it wouldn't make it a concept by any means, but I think that, yeah. Does anyone agree with me with the whole compilation album being a organized playlist of music?
Yeah.
Well, of course.
Just because it's a bunch of songs from different artists that might have the same theme or the same sound doesn't make it a concept album. It makes it a playlist. A concept album is, I mean, an album is inherently written by, one artist or one band with all the songs interconnecting in some way or another. If there's otherwise, it's just a bunch of songs that may or may not have the same theme. And it's just that, I don't know, it's just not an album to me.
I never thought of labeling a compilation as an organized playlist, but now that I'm thinking about it, that's literally exactly what a compilation is.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly what it is.
I had
Yeah.
never thought about it in those terms before.
I never really thought about it until just now. But I kind of like took a step back in my head. I'm like, wait a sec.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts on compilations being concept albums, or are we all kind of in unanimous agreement?
Like I
I
was
think-
saying, like you were saying, some can be to an extent, but
Mhm.
most of the time, centralized playlist of a theme or idea. Go ahead, Reese.
Ooh, another good concept album, David Bowie's Black Star. Bowie has so many good concept albums, but Black Star, where all of the songs are dealing. Yes.
Dude,
I brought
Ziggy,
down
bro,
Aladdin
Ziggy.
thing.
Yeah, where all the songs are dealing with Bowie's impending death and his cancer diagnosis. I remember listening. This is at least a musical experience that, despite my young age, I was alive to experience. Was listening to that album day one and being so confused as to what the goal of the record was or why he chose to go in such an experimental path. And then after he passed away, I think it was 2 days later after the album came out, all of a sudden, like, all of it just clicked.
Yeah.
And it's a phenomenal swan song of an artist looking death in the face and saying that he's going to go out on his own terms.
That's
It's like-
sad, man. That makes me sad.
It's sad, but it's so admiring. It's so admirable from a fan perspective. So talk about Aladdin Zane, Reese.
It's a fantastic album. I mean, I think as a concept album. A lot of people don't think it is. A lot of people, like what you said, like Black Star would be more considered like concept album, or like Outside or Diamond Dogs, like one of like his earlier works considered to be
Ziggy!
concept, or like, yeah, but like I think Hunky Dory and I think like Aladdin Sane are much more. I'm more of that kind of vibe when it comes to a concept album. So
Yeah, Will,
also
what are your
had-
thoughts? I'm just
Where'd you
kidding.
go, Will?
Thank you. That's all I, have to say. Thank
I
you.
also had down. I had a few other artists. Tell me what you guys think that I had down for concept albums. I had Kanye West.
Yes.
Okay.
Life of Pablo.
Yeah.
I feel like all of his albums they're like different concept albums. It's like that's one of the great things about Kanye is it feels like every album is like just a complete fresh new start for his sound.
And that's what I've always liked about Kanye, being like the producer of his music for the most part. It's like he gets to like decide that versus like you got too many rappers nowadays, they're not their own producers, so they really don't have to, their lyrics don't mean as much as to say like Kanye, where he puts like his heart into like every little tiny detail because it makes sense to him.
Yeah, like you have his first two albums have like all like the horns and like it's like a lot more like R&B
Like jazz.
influence, and then you get into like 808s and it's this like big like these like big sounds with like it just sounds a lot more experimental. And then you get into My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, my opinion, best Kanye album. I know it's generic, but like it has like all those melodies, but it also has like the more fuzzy sounds with songs like like Hell of a Life and Gorgeous and Devil in a New Dress. And then Yeezus was back to those crazy intense sounds. And then Life of Pablo was maybe a little more radio friendly. Yay is awesome. Yay's a great record.
Mhm.
But yeah,
All
I think
of-
Kanye.
Sorry, you go.
He's done a lot of different concepts, and he's done them for almost all of them very well.
All I can think of is the video of like Kanye albums is represented by The Office, and like Late Registration is like Michael Scott going like it's like jazz, do, and then like for 808s it cuts to the character that Craig Robinson plays, and
Daryl.
Daryl, and he's like, "What's rap?" But yeah, Kanye's all of them have such a specific theme to them. With Ye being more about his mental illness and Dark Twisted Fantasy being about the excess of his life. 808s being, I mean, it's in the title, being about heartbreak. I think that Kanye's definitely a good example of a modern concept album artist.
What if, like, Kanye, just like, even though like all his things have a different concept, I remember seeing one thing on the internet about like Kanye, like he like in his songs he's called himself like referred to himself as Jesus before as a god, and he's referred to himself like as smart as Thomas Edison or like something like that. Do you think that like even though different albums have different themes, do you also believe that he has like one overall theme throughout everything, or is it just you think it's all completely different?
I think for Kanye, I think it's more based on where he is in his life and the theme that he pulls. Yeah, that's my short response.
Yeah. Yeah, Kanye's a genius. The problem is he knows he's a genius.
Yeah. But then some of the ego leaks into his music and makes for some really lyrically interesting lyrics like Power. That's just one song.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in here. I was doing some Google searching. I went to the internet,
Whoa.
Google, and I typed in
Bing.
best concept
Big.
albums. Big. And songfacts.com/blog states top 10 greatest concept albums of all time. Okay, so number 1,
Okay.
they had Dark Side of the Moon, which is it's
That's
fine.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Number 2 was Tommy by The Who, which I
Okay.
could agree with.
Yeah.
Number 3 was Sgt. Pepper's, Beatles.
No.
I also could agree with.
Controversial.
Not
No,
really. It's like more, yeah.
I think it's a great album. I think in the terms of concept, the concept only applies to like 3 of the songs on the album. So
The first 2 and the last 2.
Yeah, they're
Yeah, that's what's confusing because it's like you listen to the first 2, it's like okay, no doubt this is about just
this band.
a band in a club, and then like some of them throughout when you get through like the middle tracks, it's like okay, these are just songs, but then the last 2, like the reprise and then the greatest song ever written, A Day in the Life, it's like oh, these are definitely like part of the club band theme
Because they were smoking too much pot one day and they wrote all 3 of those songs in one night and then they just changed the rest.
So then number 4, there was Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, which I could agree with.
Yeah.
Very good. And then number 5 was Thick as a Brick. So there's yours, Brendan.
Yeah.
Number 6, we had Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys.
You know, I've seen that come up a lot as a
that
concept.
record's overrated.
I disagree. I think
disagree.
it's very properly rated, but I haven't looked into the concept of it that much.
I haven't either. I just know it's a good record.
Mhm.
And I like it. Number 7 was The Wall, Pink Floyd.
Mhm.
Number 8 was Odin's Nut Gun Flake, Small Faces.
Dude, yes! That album, I've listened to that album. Matter of fact, I almost bought it at a record store. But you should all listen to that album. It's from like the 60s.
I haven't listened to the Small Faces.
Did you say
I need to
Odin's Nut Guns?
Yeah, it's a like
Small
like
Faces.
tobacco like thing.
Small
Yeah,
Faces
it's like-
is that band that had the Song of a Baker tune that I sent to you guys a
Oh,
couple months ago.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Which
You
I
should-
don't know anything about them as a band, but
You
that
should
song
listen
just
to the self-titled album, Odin's Nut Gone Flake.
Well, Song of a Baker's on that album, actually.
Yeah, no, I was saying
Oh.
the self-titled like song in that album you should also listen to. Kind of a banger.
Okay.
Yeah, that came out in 68. So that's
Jeez
like I
Louise.
think that's probably a good like first idea of even a concept album that predates Pink Floyd. And the album itself is actually psychedelic rock / pop. So I haven't listened to it enough to give a reason why it's a concept, but I am saying you should listen to it.
Number 9 was Arthur by the Kinks. I've never
Okay.
listened to this record,
Okay.
but I guess I could see that. And then this is for you, Evan. I want to see your thoughts on this one. Number 10, they put Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Interesting.
I
So
don't-
you have
I
that and
sort of get that.
That makes
before
sense.
American Idiot.
I could see. Okay,
A
Songs
lot of
for the
critics
Deaf-
would rank. I love American Idiot as much as the next
Okay.
one, but a lot of critics would not rank American Idiot in the top 10 concept albums. I don't think.
Will, you need. I'm gonna say this because you need to hear it. Songs for the Deaf is about 4 times better than American Idiot. Okay,
Just
we're not gonna.
four.
We'll argue that.
Just four.
American Idiot is one of the
So-
best albums of all time. Changed my
If
mind.
American, if
Comment,
American, okay,
change his mind.
new episode
It's
next
not.
episode. Okay, well, we're gonna have a 6-hour episode where we argue Songs for the Deaf versus American Idiot. But the point is, I totally get Songs for the Deaf. I don't know if any of you haven't listened to that record, but like that, yeah, that's totally.
Okay,
I
but
mean,
unlisted number 1 concept album though.
no.
It made another appearance.
It's gonna make an appearance every podcast.
You know, I was a
It's a concept
teenager.
album.
You know, the concept is like being a
concept is-
teenager.
How to completely alienate your entire fan base in one record.
Think
That's the
about it.
concept.
Think about it. It's the father of all, right? It has like an umbrella. It's the father of all. So it's a concept album.
On behalf of Blake, Brendan, myself, and Reese, I'd like to make it clear that Will is the only one in this group who likes this record. We do not endorse this record.
Like-
just so you before you guys
You know what?
leave. Before
You know what?
listeners
It's
leave.
music. I can listen to it. I just can't get behind listening to it multiple times.
It has absolutely no substance whatsoever, but there's just catchy tunes. Like it's not a good album. I will agree with that. It is a pretty crap album, but it's just so catchy.
I can't even listen to that album as a music
Without
fan.
crying.
Whereas like with
Yeah, honestly.
I'll compare it to Dirty Honey because I think Dirty Honey lyrically writes some very basic, and production-wise, they write some very basic,
Yeah.
rudimentary, run-of-the-mill rock songs, but their performances are so good, and the sound is so like ancient compared to
So
current
raw.
rock music
Yeah.
that it's really enjoyable to listen to. This new Green Day album sounds like the worst trends of rock music from the past 10 years.
Thank you.
And it doesn't even sound like Green Day. So like I can't even listen to it as a rock fan.
The concept, we're gonna bring this back to concept. The concept of that album, I guess in the 2000s, the mid 2000s up until like 2010, there was this trend of like rock that's like heavy enough to be rock and roll, but like catchy enough to be pop. And it's like these fuzzy sounds, these kind of basic riffs, these kind of basic like drum beats, whatever.
You
band
just
I
described
think of
Green
them-
Day.
The band I think of the most when I think of this concept is the Black Keys.
I think
Now the
it's
Black
Turn
Keys
Blue
have some
Black.
good songs. I think like songs like Lonely Boy, like that's a catchy song. That's a fun song. I like that song. But I think that concept in general, to me, is just so dry and commercial, and it just lacks all substance, and it fails to most of the time to even be catchy. So what Green Day did is they were like, you know, this concept that no one's been interested in for 10 years, we're going to make an entire album out of it. And, you know, like I said, I think that concept in general is bad. There's good moments, good songs within that concept. Like the best songs of that like style, that concept are like pretty good, okay. And then Green Day just took that concept, took an already bad concept,
An
and
outdated
just put it
concept.
in a wood chipper. It just that's. And
Let's just make it clear that although most of you agree with what he's saying, Evan is also the metalhead of the group. So he might have already a bias towards a lot of pop punk stuff. So let's just put that out there.
I love pop punk. He's 100% correct.
Okay.
I'd
I'd like to remind our listeners that in my Bill Clinton 4 challenge, I put a classic pop punk record.
My Bill.
Okay.
I need to read a tweet.
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking about the Black Keys, and I had to pull up this tweet from a guy named Ben
twit?
at bitch_updates. Okay,
twit.
so the tweet reads: This was on the 14th of April, just a few days ago. He goes, thinking about how much I hate the band The Black Keys because they gave us another generation of rock and roll guys, and all their music is good for is playing during the climax of a Red Lobster commercial.
True, though.
Dude,
He also
have you?
or he says a Red Lobster commercial when they pour when they pour liquid butter over over an endless pile of shrimp in slow motion.
Dude, have you guys seen the T-Mobile commercials that use all the instrumental Foo Fighters songs?
Yeah, I see that all the time. They use rope.
Okay, can we just say that most of us here actually like the Black Keys, and I think some of us have even seen them live.
They're fine, but like I'm not gonna go out of my way to listen to them.
I've seen the Black Keys live, and when they perform their like more generic rock tunes, they sound fantastic. But yeah, I'm in the boat of they really just made their sound so boring compared to what it used to be.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh, and if anyone,
Like their new album, I love the song "Low High." I love the song "Shine
Yeah.
a Little Light." But
my
that's
Low
it.
High, Low High. I had to do an audition with Low High. Okay.
Audition
You know,
for
you
what?
already.
I
Well, I'm
got.
sorry.
Go ahead, Evan. No, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Finish.
like, anyways, it's just like that. Like really, like that concept. It's like it. That song. If there's one song actually to sum up this concept that I was talking about earlier, it's "Low High" by the Black Keys because it's tries so hard to be rock and roll and pop that it fails at both, and it's just a boring piece of flaming garbage.
I think "Low High" is still better than some of the other album
Yeah.
tracks, but I totally
Which
understand.
tells you a lot about that
Evan
concept.
was auditioning for a Broadway adaptation of the Black Keys.
I love
That's why he
how
auditioned Low High.
Yeah, that's what it was actually.
Oh, I just thought of a modern concept album. It's okay. It's not that good, but it's the most direct modern
It's not
concept
that
album
good.
I can think
Let's
of in
talk about
regards to how forward it is with its lyrics and its story. And it's an album by the Lemon Twigs called "Go to School," and the concept is that a couple is not able to have children, so they get a monkey from the forest and raise it to be in school. And the entire concept of the album revolves around this monkey trying to fit in at school. It's not that good, but very admirable.
Just shows you the power of songwriting on hallucinogens.
Harry
me-
Styles' new album was made entirely on hallucinogens, and it sounds great.
Let me throw this at you. What about considering a concept album that doesn't even have lyrics in it necessarily? My example that I could come up with here.
Discovery Daft Punk.
Yeah.
Okay. There's some. Okay. Let me give my example. My example was a album called Pall Mall by Corp, and they make a lot of vaporwave music. This one in particular is like completely mall soft. It's kind of ambient music, but at the same time, there's an obvious theme to it about being in a mall. So I just want to hear like what people's thoughts would be if, for example, in this album, it's all about basically you're walking through a mall, you're just walking, you hear footsteps, and you hear like advertisements over the loudspeakers and stuff like that. So it's almost like putting you in like somebody's like shoes while you're listening to music. Like, would you consider that a concept, even though it doesn't have any lyrics that like directly like say anything? It's just kind of ambient in the background, but it kind of tells a story.
I'm hesitant to label ambient music as concept versus not concept specifically because I haven't listened to it that much, but I would think if it can make you feel the emotion or experience that it's intending to, then it can be a concept. But for the most part, I feel like I don't know. I've never really thought of ambient albums as what I go to when I want to listen to a concept.
Well, it's a concept, but is it a concept album?
Well,
Like,
yeah,
that
it's an
may
album
sound-
music, but I don't know. It's
How much
tough.
time are we coming up on?
We're at
What time?
105.
Yeah, 1 hour 5 minutes. I don't know. That's such a good question, though. Uh, like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know if you think ambient music is is a
Our concept albums.
Or like
concept
even like
album.
instrumental music.
Yeah, I don't know, because there's some instrumentals that actually
Classical.
that make me feel-
Classical. That's a good
Yeah.
point. That's a good point. We didn't
Mhm.
talk about Beethoven.
No,
That man
seriously,
was
when
a
I'm
concept
listening
genius.
to classical music, I work. I mean, I work in a concert hall, so I'm able to go see orchestras. And whenever I sit and listen to classical music, I am more in my thoughts than I am with any other style of music that I listen to. And my mood is entirely dictated on, or my thought direction is entirely dictated on the atmosphere of the music. And I don't know why other genres don't do it as significantly to me, but I don't know. I don't consider classical music like on a personal level. Uh, I mean, I guess you can have concept albums in classical music, but I don't consider the genre as a whole conceptual, even though it makes me feel emotions that I would
I
normally feel in a concept album.
I
if that
think the
makes
reason behind you saying that, like how other music doesn't do that, would be like when a song has lyrics in it, it makes you think about the lyrics. When a song doesn't have lyrics, it makes you like think. It makes you think for yourself, basically, like the entire plot, instead of just like enhancing what the person is saying. You have to like think of like the entire idea. Like there's a build up in like a symphony or something like that, and you're like, okay, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And all of a sudden, it just like comes back down. You basically have to paint the picture yourself. Versus when you're hearing something with like lyrics in it, it's it's telling you the story how it is, for the most part.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Do we have anything else to talk about regarding concept albums?
Should we just list like our three favorite
Yeah,
concept
just name like
albums?
3 you
Close it
really,
out?
really like. Kind of close it up here.
Yeah.
Name
Let's
3
do it.
albums, 3 concept albums you really, really love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I'll go first. I have two of my favorites.
First.
Oh, three. Okay, so my all-time favorite will be The Wall, generic. My second favorite, also generic, will be The Dark Side of the Moon or Wish You Were Here. They
Mhm.
kind of go hand in hand. And the third would be American Idiot. Because
Yeah.
the only reason why I say that is because like that was like the first like rock like opera or like story album that I ever listened to, and that's honestly what got me into listening to real music that wasn't pop or radio stuff.
All right, I'll go next. My favorite, and one that I was prepared to talk about in length, but ended up not talking about at all, was My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade.
Black Parade. Yeah.
That's my number one for sure.
Mhm.
Not from a this is the best album ever made, but just personal enjoyment. I love that album to death and could sing it all the way through.
Sadly, I do always say American Idiot. A lot of people get that kind of paired up with my Black Parade a lot.
Interesting, because the plot lines are very different.
Different, yeah.
But if you look at
Um,
the audience, I mean, Green Day,
It's gonna be
MCR.
similar.
yeah, pop punk and emo pop punk. It's like pretty close. Next one, Thick as a Brick, just because it's the one that I brought. I guess I have to include it in a top three. The third is probably, I mean, I talked about it, some Melodrama by Lord, but the Fiona Apple giving all three of these a run for their money. That
Yeah.
oh, we need to have just an extended discussion of that album.
Yeah.
Damn.
I mean, I gotta go with. I mean, I've been talking about American Idiot this entire time, so I gotta put that up there. But
I gotta go with
I-
Father of All Motherfuckers.
right. Well, no, I just gotta throw out there again, like I did last time, that Green Day is one of my favorite bands. Less because of the musical aspect and more about the emotional impact that it had on me. So I'm always gonna be biased towards that
Did you
stuff.
just say emotional impact?
I have a tweet
Yeah.
for that. Let me pull up the tweet. Keep talking.
Will, are you gonna go
Come
cry
on.
Heart of Broken Dreams after this?
Yeah. Well, no. Okay. Basically, the soundtrack to puberty for me was Green Day.
That's
I love how when
honestly,
he's- I love how
kind
when
of
he said it,
feel
he
you
goes,
there.
puberty.
Yeah, when I said puberty, I had a voice crack.
Well, if
Without
you saw
listening
me in
to
5th
11
grade, you know I'd be listening to Green Day.
Yeah, Green Day was kind of like, but yeah, American Idiot. I've never really done as much deep listens to concept albums as I should. But I mean, Tommy is obviously a classic. I mean, The Wall is a classic. That's probably the.
Will, you've never sat through and listened to The Wall. Don't be saying that.
You've accused me of that multiple times, but I actually have listened to that one.
What is the
Fine.
14th song on the wall, Evan? Or, I mean, Will.
I couldn't tell you that. I didn't say I know it in and out, but I've definitely listened. But yeah, that's my list. My very broad list.
Yay!
All right.
We're gonna cut off Evan again. Go ahead, Evan.
All right, guys. That's the end of the
Alright, see you next time.
No. Oh, by the way, if anyone was wondering, if any of the listeners were wondering what pop punk album I put in my Bill Clinton 4, it was Milo Goes to College by the Descendants. Anyways, I'd say my 3 concept albums.
Wait,
I
Evan,
know
real quick. I have a question. What's the plural of
Go for
vinyl?
it. It's vinyl, not vinyls. I know that now.
I had to re-bullet you.
So I'd say I'm gonna echo The Wall. I mean, it's just such a well-told and well-crafted story. Like it's so easy to immerse yourself in that. Like, it's just incredible. I didn't really think of this one as a concept album, but Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age makes a lot of sense as a concept album. It's very well written. It's extremely distinctive sounding. Like, if you hear a song off that album, you know it's from that album, just like the way the music is written, the way it's produced. And I think I talk about this album every single day of my life, To Pimp a Butterfly. Again, it's masterful storytelling. It's not like mainstream radio rap. It's got like those jazz beats, and it's got that hip hop and R&B influence. And even at an hour and 20 minutes, it's like gripping the entire time. And its themes are very creative, and Kendrick Lamar is a genius.
Yes. Okay, and I'll wrap it up. I think everybody else went. Favorite concept album of all time, I would have to agree with Blake. I would probably say The Wall is. That's probably my personal favorite, as well as like Animals, Wish You Were Here. I mean, any Pink Floyd album. I also would say Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by the Smashing Pumpkins. And then also a very underrated album we actually did not talk about. It was Graduation Day by 6ix9ine.
Uh,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I really meant
You
to say
better
Lil
be
Pump. I meant to say Lil Pump Harvard dropout.
I've seen Lil Pump live. I've experienced that, and it is
Biggest regret of your life?
I could have seen Catfish in the Bottlemen, and instead I saw Lil Pump, and it was the worst experience.
Okay, so guys, in summary, when it comes to concept albums, we agree that Mother, Father of All is number one.
Mother of all.
We have come to the conclusion that everything can be a concept.
Okay, did we actually talk about the Despicable Me 2 soundtrack?
God, don't you
Hey,
need the Shrek?
it was produced by Pharrell. That means it's a concept album.
Happy,
Won't you say me too?
happy 2 Electric Boogaloo.
We weren't going to talk about how soundtracks are actually not concept albums.
Okay, that counts as a compilation sometimes.
Wait, can we kind of throw one on top, like that's kind of agreeable is above all of our lists? The greatest hits of Poison. I mean, come on.
If the concept is like, I don't want to say anything that offends people. Okay, never mind.
Thank you very much for watching.
I was
No,
gonna
who
say
actually
something about,
likes Who actually likes Poison other than me?
I have
See,
Open Up and Say
got,
On.
like,
I have
Dude,
Open Up and Say On vinyl.
All right,
I will-
guys, to wrap
Dude,
it up, we're gonna be
Poison
finishing
is-
up here. Make up your finishing thoughts.
Poison is like the crappiest band ever, but I love them. Let's end it with that.
All right, guys, to finish it up, we're gonna listen to a quick 30-second clip of my favorite concept song.
Nothing but a
Billy.
good time.
I know where this is going.
I don't.
This is White Dads at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Am I the only one who remembers?
Where is this from?
Yes.
Home Depot theme song.
So,
Do that too? Do you guys remember that they'd sell hot dogs outside of Home Depot? Is that just me?
Wait,
All right.
No, I
Thank you
see
very
the
much for listening, guys. Take care. Stay safe. Like,
Poison
share,
concept
seriously, if
subscribe.
anybody made it this far, why?
I would have clicked off an hour ago.
We're just doing this to
Hey,
like.
let us know if you get to the end of the video. We'll pay for your therapy.
We're doing this entirely for our own vanity. So if you've made it this far, that's incredible.
You
We
reached
love
a new
you.
low point.
All right. We love you very much. Stay tuned for the very next podcast if we're not all dead. Love you. Bye-bye.